are these people?
You ready for your story?
Yours.
Oh yeah, it's my story. God, what is wrong with me? This weed must be better than I think. But yeah. So, Meme Wars. I love the cute little Pikachu. Look at him. Look at him, such a good boy. So this is a article by Kit Klarenberg. He is writing this in MintPress. So from memes to doxing, unmasking NATO's information warfare strategy. So, have you seen any of these little guys online in your travels?
Yes.
Okay, so you are aware of the NAFO bots.
Yes.
Okay, so that's one of the subjects of this. So, in November 2023, NATO's Center of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats published a disturbing working paper, quote, Humor in Online Information Warfare, Case Study on Russia's War in Ukraine. Well, it's war on Ukraine. I just find that funny. It received no mainstream attention, yet the contents offer unprecedented insight into the military's alliance insidious weaponization of social media to distort public perceptions and manufacture consent for war. They also raise grave questions about online trolling or dissonant voices over the past decades and beyond.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
So, the working paper ostensibly considers instances of humor put to effective use to counter disinformation and propaganda in online spaces. Using Russia's war on Ukraine, it concludes humor-based responses in the information space and in the physical domain have been found to deliver multiple clear benefits for Ukraine and NATO. Why does that sound like a robot wrote it? Humor-based responses in the information space. And like humor chip activated. Like that's what anyway. Like who writes this way? Avowedly, a practical review seeking to identify examples of best practice from both government and civil society. For wider future application, the paper recommends Western states, militaries, and security intelligence services master the art of online ridicule under the aegis of counter disinformation. You studied the sword. I studied the online ridicule. I'm a master of the art of online ridicule. Are there like Boy Scout badges for mastering the art of online ridicule? Can I get one of those? That would be nice. It contends humor reaches the part that other countermeasures like fact-checking or media users educate cannot. Mass deployment of memes, moreover, has the advantage of exploiting social media platform algorithms and addressing audiences that are not inclined to consume boring products. So, I mean, thoughts so far, Care Bear?
I mean, I don't know honestly what to think of this. Well, I mean, it makes sense in terms of. No, actually, I don't get this at all because I just no. I had to think about this, but it just seems so stupid to me. Like it just seems very random and just seems very like almost clickbaity in a way to me. And honestly, I think for me, I'm just not into meme culture in that way. So you know this. So so for me, it's just like I usually don't get the butt of the joke anyway. But it just seems very a lot of memes are just very obscure.
Yeah.
It just goes over my head. But the idea, like, it's attached to stuff that is related to government bullshit. It's just like stupid, and yeah. So it's
Nice
just a way
meme.
to kind of it's just a way to just kind of capitalize, with, I guess, Gen Z, because they very much would be kind of into meme culture and kind of be like looking for that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I just don't get it personally.
I have achieved comedy.
Yeah. So, as we shall see, the true value in weaponizing humor for NATO is distorting the battlefield reality in Ukraine and future theaters of Western proxy conflict for public consumption. Meanwhile, any social media user deviating from NATO-endorsed narratives can be subjected to intensive harassment, discrediting them and their message among a wide sector of online audiences, if not scaring them away from digital information spaces entirely. The working paper advocates for the creation of an army of private citizens for the purpose. The paper begins by noting that state-backed parody and mockery of the enemy in conflict are nothing new, citing satirical newspapers, Whisper Times, distributed to British soldiers fighting in Western Front trenches during the First World War, and the BBC German service, which fought Hitler with humor. Today, though, social media has democratized access and audience, therefore opening the playing field to self-motivated private individuals while facilitating their joining forces in informal collectives for greater effect. Multiple footnotes indicate weaponizing mockery is a long-standing NATO objective. A report published by the Military Alliance in 2017 titled Stratcom Laughs in Search of an Analytical Framework is cited, while an academic study, Building a Meme War Machine, a comparative analysis of mimetic insurgencies in cyberspace. Okay? Which is just, okay, is said to be forthcoming. The former caused a mainstream stir upon release. It was in turn inspired by a NATO-sponsored paper authored 2 years earlier by Jeff Giesa, tech guru, and Peter Thiel, associate, which declared trolling is the social media of equivalent of guerrilla warfare, and memes are its currency of propaganda. Daesh is conducting mimetic warfare. The Kremlin is doing it. It's expensive. The capabilities exist. Why aren't we trying it? Why aren't we trying it, Care Bear?
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
Stratcom Laughs was highly influential. In May 2021, the Ukrainian government Center for Strategic Communication and Information Security wholeheartedly endorsed its findings while listing the benefits of propagandistic humor. These included making perception less critical, using common context to convey messages which the audience agrees, simplifying everything to the obvious, creating clear groups, strong and intelligent, we, and clumsy and stupid, they. Of course, the audience associates itself with the former and begins to despise the latter. So, another video by Hotspot. Simplifying managed understanding is easily disseminated by the audience and creates the necessary social context for propagandists. Would you like to see what that actually means in practice?
Sure.
So also Newland dropped down, right? So has resigned. Hotspot letting us know. But the main part is this video they're playing underneath it, which describes exactly what this paper is saying happened.
Fuck the EU.
No, exactly.
I'm not saying the whole U.S. government feels that way. There is division on this, but the neoconservative element wants very much to change the strategic dynamic in Eastern Europe. The neoconservatives can now demonize a leader of a country. That sells with the American people. So you don't just sort of argue a policy, you attack the leader. So the neoconservatives became very skilled at picking out leaders, finding their ugly traits, and then highlighting them. You got a black hat versus white hat, you keep repeating that basic scenario, and it works with the American people.
We've got to realize what Vladimir Putin is. He's an old KGB colonel that wants to restore the Russian Empire.
You make them into demons, and the American people find that the way they can understand the world. Once that happens, it's very difficult for a journalist or anyone else to say, hold it, that guy, he's got more of a gray hat than a white hat or a black hat. And if you say that, you suddenly you're a Yanukovych apologist or you're a Putin apologist, and then the attacks come on to the person saying it, the journalist, the academic, or whoever.
I mean, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I remember like this happened to Brianna Joy Gray a few months
Mm-hmm.
ago. Like she mentioned some stuff regarding Ukraine, like the blonde, like something she said, but basically like blonde eyed,
Yep.
blue-eyed children there, and like how I think it was the idea of that they are somewhat treated better than like black children here or anywhere in the world. And the NATO bots went after her, for that. And even just essentially, I'm not going to repeat the word here, but, but basically making a meme out of her using a slur, a racial slur. Like, and even just this week, and I think, just especially on Twitter, just being careful, and I think it's a lot of these mainstream, like profiles that if you respond to it, depending on who it is, often, and I found out the hard way a little bit this week, when I responded to something on Twitter, like I kind of landed in a bot form, and I just got not harassed, but like I got tweet after tweet. It was regarding student loan debt. Like there were so many bots that were basically telling me, like, oh, Trump is trying his best to cancel all student debt and like all this bullshit. And it was just kind of like, you people are not real, so I'm not even going to respond to any of you really.
Is not real.
But
exactly. Because that's where these bots are also at.
Right. But yeah, but it's like the idea that, it's often often the mainstream that will use this stuff to bully and to, psychologically destroy you in terms of what you say online. And especially if you go against the narrative of, what the empire wants you to say or think.
Yeah.
So it just kind of sucks that you can't even speak your mind online without the problem of, essentially being harassed or being made into a meme that often criticizes your character, or worse yet, depending, criticizes your identity.
Yeah.
Why you bully me?
Yeah, why you bully Care Bear? Don't bully Care Bear. That's not nice. So the cover page of the European Center of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats case study, authored by Keir Giles. I just want you to remember that name because it's going to come up again. So look at this. Look, Russia, not Russia, Russia, not Russia, Russia, not Russia, 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 Russia. But yeah, that's just trying to make a point with that humor again. That's their cover page on their TPS report. So it is highly serendipitous coincidence that the North Atlantic Fellow Organization, aka NATO, was formed following Russia's February 2022 invasion of Ukraine. The vast, supposedly grassroots Twitter troll collective, identifiable by Doge profile photos, inexorably blitzes Vatniks, Russian officials, and anyone failing to toe NATO's line on the Ukraine proxy war, with a vicious blend of absurdity, ad hominem, memes, and ridicule while raising money for Kyiv's war effort. The group embodies the pronouncements of Stratcom's laughs to a T. NATO features prominently in the working paper, with some activists quoted at length. It notes the collective grew from a fundraising initiative for the Georgian Legion, a brutal paramilitary faction active in the proxy war. Unmentioned is that independent financing efforts are necessary because former Western government backing for the group is politically and legally unfeasible. Its members openly boast of committing hideous war crimes, in particular executing unarmed, bound Russian prisoners of war in cold blood. Sounds familiar, don't it? NATO founder Kamil Dzwiskis is a Hitler-admiring anti-Semite who has heroized white supremacist mass murderers. The NATO paper quotes him saying, "All Russians see themselves as incredibly serious and important, so they struggle with being made fun of." This perspective tallies perfectly with the military alliance's perspective on online psychological warfare. The working paper repeatedly argues Russian and pro-Russian individuals and entities are intensely sensitive to mockery and show an inability to cope with being the object of derision. The working paper judges NATO to be an ideal structure and format for countering disinformation, largely through the application of humor and mockery. The group's efforts were moreover found to provide the base material for memes in the form of first-hand images and videos of Russian failures of Ukrainian determination. This capability augmented the responsiveness and impact of Kyiv's information campaign, which were, for example, instrumental in securing U.S.-made F-16 combat aircraft in August 2023. The excerpts are striking, for throughout the first 18 months of the proxy conflict, Russian failures and Ukrainian determination absolutely dominated Western media coverage of the war. The narrative that the invasion was an unmitigated disaster and huge embarrassment for Moscow in every way, and Kyiv could pull off a spirited underdog victory and repel the invaders, if not ultimately march upon the Kremlin, as long as sufficient Western Wunderwaffe arrived, was universal and indomitable. Wunderwaffe, can you translate German, Care Bear? Wunderwaffe? Wunderwaffe? Wonder Weapon.
No, but I could look it up.
Is Wonder Weapon. I already know it. I've played enough Call of Duty Zombies
Okay.
to know about Wunderwaffe. Wunderwaffe. In reality, while there were undoubtedly Russian failures and Ukrainian determination aplenty from the start, Kyiv was economically and military crippled within weeks. The special military operation was concerned not with conquering every inch of the country, but with compelling Volodymyr Zelensky's government to implement the Minsk Accords and declare neutrality. This was almost achieved in April 2022 via Turkey-brokered peace talks, but then Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson, flew to Kyiv, offering the Ukrainians the blankest of blank checks to keep fighting, and we covered that. The scale of Ukraine's losses, the dire situation for the country from day one of Russia's invasion, and British American intelligence conveniences that produced the conflict concealed from Western audiences by their governments and media, meant siding with and arming Kyiv appeared to be the objectively sensible, reasonable, moral position. After all, they were fighting an enemy that embodied absolute evil and incompetence. Hopefully, NATO was always on hand to relentlessly remind the public of both qualities, particularly the latter. Stratcom Laughs has triumphed. Public perceptions were rendered less critical. Serious, complex questions were simplified to the obvious. Clear groups were created. We read that, didn't we? I thought. Were created strong and intelligent, we and clumsy, stupid, and they. And Western audiences, of course, associated themselves with the former, right? Fast forward to today, and mainstream polls indicate that just 1 in 10 Europeans believe Ukraine can win, with most believing a compromise settlement is the only way to end the conflict. In June 2023, Ukraine launched a counteroffensive originally intended to start months earlier. It was much delayed due to adverse weather conditions and late weapon deliveries. Officials in Kyiv, many Western journalists and pundits, and NATO all heavily hyped the effort in advance. The group published many memes. Some promoted a beach party for fellas in Crimea that summer, and others depicted orcs fleeing from the swarms of leopards. Those leopards. So leopard tanks, where are those from? So, I mean, they're NATO armament. I think they're British leopard tanks.
Maybe.
Wrong. The latter played on a trope that Ukrainian political and military chiefs in the Western media were extremely keen to perpetuate, that Moscow soldiers terrified of German Leopard 2 tanks. So
Sorry, that was me.
you're okay. I thought my soundboard suddenly was playing something. Would abandon their position as the armored vehicles advanced. Instead, they were easily blown to smithereens by extensive minefields created by Russian forces while they waited for the counteroffensive to commence and low-cost Lancet drones. Within just a month, Ukraine had lost 20% of the vehicles and armor supplied by the West with nothing to show for it. This remained the case when the counteroffensive fizzled out at the end of 23, with just 0.25% of the territory occupied by Russia in the initial phase of the invasion regained. Meanwhile, casualties may have exceeded 100,000. This can only be considered an absolute horrendous catastrophe from every angle. The Washington Post published an extensive post-mortem on the counteroffensive in December of that year. It is clear that among other failures, a fatal error in planning for the effort, overseen by the Pentagon, was the assumption that the Russians would flee in many areas. No alternative scenarios were considered. The Wall Street Journal has also highlighted other egregious strategic shortcomings which made the counteroffensive calamity inevitable. It writes, Western military officials knew Kyiv didn't have all the training or weapons, from shells to warplanes, that it needed to dislodge Russian forces, but they hoped Ukrainian courage and resourcefulness would carry the day. It seems Ukrainians were dispatched on a suicide mission because Western military apparatchiks brought into the simplistic, misleading propaganda narrative of Russian failures versus Ukrainian determination. Courage and resourcefulness are admirable qualities that Ukrainians have consistently exhibited since February 2022, but they are no match, let alone substitute, for landmines, tanks, fighter jets, artillery shells, and other weapons of war. That confirming the self-evident fact came at the cost of so many lives is a criminal tragedy. Throughout the working paper, axiomatic reference is made to how weaponizing humor imposes costs on adversaries and aggressors. Contradictorily, though, it is conceded that the direct impact on Russia itself is hard to measure. Indeed, it seems implausible that Kremlin officials and Russian soldiers on the front line suffer any cost whatsoever from the mockery of anonymous Western social media users, or anonymous, depending on where you're from. This begs the obvious question of why the approach is considered effective and who the true adversaries in NATO's comedic crosshairs are. A clue is offered by a passage celebrating how the overall effect of the community built around humor has been to turn the tables on social media platforms. As a result, the agents of influence and other servants of authoritarian regimes who for so long held the advantage are turned into the targets rather than the deliverers of mockery and abuse. The article again quotes, this causes both Russian officials and their extended network of influencers, enablers, and trolls to realize that if they choose to serve a criminal regime, they expose themselves to mass ridicule and mockery. That sounds like projection to me. For influencers, enablers, and trolls, read anti-war, anti-NATO, anti-empire, journalists, researchers, activists, and private citizens who dare express the wrong opinions or expose inconvenient truths online that challenge NATO-endorsed narratives. This is certainly the case in my regard. Kit Klarenberg's. The working paper cites me curtly, responding to puerile abuse from a detractor on Twitter as an example of how those who oppose Russia, China, or other hostile regimes publicly face consequences by the hostile regime itself or by its agents and sympathizers. Elsewhere, the paper endorses harassment, stalking, doxing, and creating parody accounts of such influencers, enablers, and trolls, while also warning that these are potential hazards faced by individuals taking on authoritarian propaganda structures. A NATO activist is quoting as saying, I've seen people get doxed and harassed, and it doesn't look fun. I want my family to be safe. The sentiment is no doubt shared by NATO's many targets, but as they serve a criminal regime, they're fair game from NATO's perspective. British Ministry of Defense apparatchik Keir Giles authored the working paper. It reveals he briefly tried to earn a living as a stand-up comedian. so knows what it feels like when a joke falls flat. An apology he recently authored for Baltic state Nazi collaborators implicated in the Holocaust, in which he claimed they are misunderstood, was certainly not received with much humor. He has promoted the output of a dedicated parody account of none other than Kit Klarenberg for some time, aka Tit Klarenberg, right? Which, you know, you can see what it says up there. Ironically enough, I found the account's posts amusing if they were actually funny. Instead, it has mocked the victims of sexual abuse and also dabbled in anti-Semitism. In late January, the parody account published a post mocking me for being tormented as a child over my name. Little did I know these lame attempts at ridicule were a dedicated NATO psychological warfare operation. And we've seen this to multiple of our, you know, brothers and sisters. And sometimes the parody isn't even part of it. They just try to incriminate you, you know, and like copycat you, you know? So impersonation, like that kind of stuff. So,
which in a way is best case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the latter post gained a little traction in response, right? You know, the best thing about calling kid is everything it rhymes with, right? This is what he's referring to. The later post gained little traction in response. Many Twitter users expressed shock and revulsion of such playground bullying behavior. This highlights another shortcoming in NATO's approach. The group's visceral, unabashed, genocidal hatred of Russian and all Russians is so extreme that they frequently repulse audiences, to the extent of making them ask if they're supporting the wrong side by backing Ukraine. Moreover, as Alexei Navalny ally Leonid Volkov has observed, this output actively assists the Kremlin's propaganda strategies. Left-wing alternative comedy legend Stuart Lee has written about the paucity of right-wing stand-up comedians. He attributes this deficit to right-wing politics being overwhelmingly concerned with punching downward, which is simply unfunny bullying, which performative comedy is a heroic little struggle which should always be punching upward. Who could be on a stage crowing about their victory and ridiculing those less fortunate than them without any sense of irony, shame, or self-knowledge? That's not a stand-up comedian. That's just a cunt. So, you know, Stuart Lee himself, although he's referencing George Carlin here about punching upward and punching downward, right? And I don't know if you've ever seen Carlin deal with a heckler, but he knows how to ground and pound downward too, if he needs to. So, you know, what's this? And only a Sith deals in absolutes, which is an absolute. But this may well explain why Keir Giles failed in his quest to become a stand-up comedian and why his jokes continue to fall flat to this day. But for all those who oppose war, his working papers is no laughing matter. It is advocacy for the military alliance to create a permanent online harassment battalion to inflict psychological, emotional, personal, and professional damage on them while convincing decent people to hate the oppressed and cheer the oppressors. Keir Giles was repeatedly approached for comment by MintPress News for comment, but did not respond prior to publication. Thoughts, Care Bear?
Still don't get it. And yeah, I just feel like a lot of these memes / troll farms, whatever you want to call it, like it's just there to essentially, I call them the beehives of the internet. You know, like they're just there to, you know, you attack an idea or even someone seemingly within their farm, and like that's it. They're there to kind of attack you, troll you, ridicule you, and they can be just outright disgusting. But the idea, like, it gains attention and if people profit from this is disgusting to me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's the part that I don't get, is the idea that someone is making bank of people suffering. and in this way.
Yeah.
And yeah, granted, it's online, and
Well, I
it's
think
not like
if it helps to make more sense, you know, you've seen like legacy media having to switch, right? You know, they've lost, people have stopped watching them, right? So they've had to move to the places where the people are, which is places like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, right? Those kind of places to keep control over that, right? Because, you know, it allows people to skirt their narrative management, right? So this is just an extension of that control, right? You know, this is things like what the NED is doing with governments, and, you know, the CIA is more than willing to do. This is classic, you know, PSYOP behavior. So, you know, it's no question that this is happening in Ukraine, in Israel, in all of these conflicts. Like, information war is now a thing. So, you know, and we tend to be losing it. So yeah, I don't know. I think the most despicable stuff is the impersonation. I mean, that could ruin professional relationships and relationships in general very easily if people are caught unawares. You know, if you get an email from Twitter from any of us that sounds suspect, you know, it might not be us. So, but anyway, anything you have left to say? Close this out.
they suck.
Yes, they do. Speaking of suck, YouTube censors us still. So we have to find other ways to monetize. So if you appreciate our work and want to donate to us, you know, maybe you want Jesse to get a new laptop so he can do stuff, or, you know, in case my computer goes down, and that's going to be a thing I don't want to think about. Because that's going to cost monies. But yeah, you know, scan this QR code or go to ko-fi.com/indie-news-network. Or if you're in the live chat with us now, you can put !donate and it'll give you a link. You know, fun stuff comes up on screen. You know, it's nice.
As we saw.
But, you know, otherwise, dude, don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget. I know you're forgetful. Just do it now. It's very easy. You know, leave a comment. Let us know what number you got when you hit the subscribe button.